And hello, team. Welcome back. We are talking resource management. Is it boring? Is it exciting? Is it something you spend a lot of time on? I don't know. Most avoid it, but you should. Trust me when we get to this. Now, the slides are going to have a lot of information on it. It's really just for your background in case you want to do your own research. I'm just going to hit some high points that you really need to know as project management supervisors along the way. One of those high points is resource management doesn't happen alone. The first thing you can do is make sure you clarify roles and responsibilities. That's not only going to help reduce conflict on your project teams, but it's also key to understanding what skills are required to complete your project and when those skills will be available. So when they're available is going to tie to schedule baseline, right? How much those skills cost. All right, higher skilled labor costs more than lower skilled labor. That's going to impact your schedule. And their skill level and timing is going to, in fact, impact the requirements you can deliver to satisfy these stakeholders and to ensure quality. So you need to understand the roles and responsibilities. That's point one in resource management because it's going to impact your scope, the quality, stakeholders, cost. Maybe you have to procure them or contract out for them. Basically, you're looking to reduce risks by integrating resource management into all these other topics. The other thing you need to do is keep track of assignments as a project manager using this RACI chart. We call it a RACI chart. That stands for responsible, accountable, consult, and inform. I've used RACI charts a lot. I've even added other words to them like support, S. It's still always referred to as a RACI. A RACI is really a subset of what we call a RAM. That's a resource activity matrix. But the better one is a RACI. Notice I have my activity, which is related to the schedule itself. The activity listed here, I only did a few, for example. And this is actually a real RACI I used when I was active duty. This is my name here. I didn't use Andy. I had a title at the time, but I've modified it. This was a friend of mine named DB. So you can see that no matter what task, in this case, create the charter, there's only one person accountable for each task. There can be multiple people that I can consult with. There can be multiple groups like the functional managers, general officers. This was the Pentagon staff. There can be multiple people that I inform. There can be multiple people that are responsible, right? This group owed a piece of the product, and this group owed a different piece, and this group owed a different piece. So lots of people are responsible, but only one for each task accountable. That's the point I wanted to make. Now let's have some fun, right? So you're using your RACI matrix to keep track of your project deliverables. How many individuals can be accountable for each deliverable? Da, 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 da. Okay, ding. The answer is, of course, B. One person is accountable. Now, on this slide, when I plan resource management, there's a lot of information here. Don't worry about most of it, but notice, use the tools for project management supervisors. And I've listed a few tabs that I think you should take the time, open up the Excel, and just review, right? And if you have any questions, send me an email. Happy to go over it. But when you're talking resource management, you're identifying resources. Those can be people, equipment, those can be facilities, even electricity, right? So you want to consider your resources and your resource plan on the impact on budget, on schedule, and on the requirements or scope of the work. That really is central to the conversation we have this week and is really about your assignment. So keep that in mind. You could also, I wanted to point out, build a team charter. Now, as I pointed out before, This is not the project charter, which is formal, signed by your sponsor who owns the budget and yourself, and should not change. The team charter is different. This is a document where the team gets together and decides, how are we going to get along? What are the rules of behavior? Uh, what can I expect from you in terms of conflict and escalation and et cetera, et cetera. So it's really, and it can be updated many times uh, as well. So team charter is a good team building activity that helps the team understand how they work well with each other. That's also part of resource management. Now, when I talk resource management, I really go back to week one, which was management and leadership. As we talked about those four pillars of a great project manager, we said was a great project manager has management skills, leadership skills, interpersonal skills, which is next week, by the way, and technical skills. So this was just kind of a summary of the difference in resource management between management and leadership. And you're doing both all the time. When you're managing, you're controlling things. So you're trying to figure out what level of resource I need, when is it available, etc., and work it into the process, into the schedule, into the budget. You're tasking people and following up all along. As a leader, this resource management is about creating vision and goals. How do I motivate the team, right? How do I persuade them, communicate with them, etc.? You can see the different levels is all I wanted to touch on. Now, this just and so leadership and management is tied to emotional intelligence, right? Emotional intelligence, a good manager and leader is going to recognize emotions and express them. You know, without getting too mushy, and listen. You want to create positive relationships, and of course, communicate. Using those skills to communicate with stakeholders. So that more on this next week, but they are related to the pillars. I just wanted to touch on it. Now, back to the topic at hand. Notice in project management, up through PMBOK Guide Edition 6, this was very clear. It's still a truism. It's still true. So we need to be aware of it, that there are only 3 estimating processes in project management: for costs or budget, for activity durations. This is related to the schedule, and of course for resource management. What I wanted to point out is, notice how historically the inputs are the same. The tools and techniques are nearly identical, and the outputs. When I'm estimating, and it doesn't matter really if it's budgeting, schedule, or resource management. You need to think of all of them because they're the same. If I change my resource estimate, you should say to yourself, what's the impact then on the schedule estimate or the cost estimate? If I change my budget estimate, you should naturally say to yourself, man, based on that slide Molnar put up there, how's that going to impact my schedule estimate or duration or my resource estimate as well? That's really all this slide is meant to show, is how they're integrated, they're related along the way. Now, when we estimate activity resources, there are a lot of inputs, tools, and techniques and outputs you can use. I mentioned these because these are the tools to focus on. I can use expert judgment, right? I've hired people with this skill level before. Here's what I'm looking for and how much they could cost. That's expert judgment. I could do bottom-up estimating. That's great. I could start from the bottom of my work breakdown structure, which we talked about in scope, and I could just add up from the bottom up and add up all the total dollars that I'm going to need for these resources. I could do an analogous estimate, and the root there is analogy, right? I can take a previous project who did something similar and go, well, by analogy, they use these resources with these skill levels in this time period, and here's what it costs them. And since we're a month or 2 years later, I'm going to add 10%. It's an analogous estimate. for resources. I can also do parametric estimating, and the root here is parameter, right? And so we do parametric estimating or parameters all the time. When I say to yourself, how much is your house per square foot? You say, oh, my house is $100 per square foot. Well, that's not really what your house costs, but as a parametric estimate, it's a good summary of your house value because that's the price per square foot. That's the parameter, right? And so project management likes to say, well, it's an algorithm, that's a fancy word, or statistical model. Here's the key right here. It's historical data with variables. So the dollar amount per square foot are the variables, and I'm using historical data to say, well, my house seems to be about $100 per square foot. That's a parametric estimate. It's not what you can get for your house if you sold it today or what you put into it. I could also do data analysis, like capture courses of action to test various scenarios, etc. I just wanted to go over those tools a little bit in any estimating process. This is kind of a estimating isms, good for cost, schedule, or resource management. Notice a more accurate estimate, if smaller in size, is better, right? Estimates that are smaller and accurate improve accuracy. They're going to help you get to the solution on time. So be careful with people on your team that like to give wild estimates or like to pad. That's what this P is. No padding. I want an accurate estimate. If you don't hit it, I'm not here to beat you up about it. I'm here to work with you to understand why. What were the conditions we didn't realize or that changed along the way? Doesn't matter. Let's figure it out. We're project managers. Let's learn lessons. But to keep risk low, I want to make sure that I don't pad estimates. Okay. So then I have to go out and acquire the resources. You'll see that in the game. Those resources are assigned to you, but you could have acquired them or you could have procured them. So some are pre-assigned. We could pretend like maybe you negotiated for some of them. Some of them might be virtual on the game you're playing. And you may have even chosen some based on a multi-criteria decision analysis. You may have said, well, I have only so much budget and I want this skill level, but I can't afford it. So I'll take this skill level. That'll make my schedule a little longer, right? But my schedule isn't critical, so I didn't weight it as heavily, right? So there are lots of ways to get your team and to assess how you get the team. One other one that I don't have here is called procurement. I could just go to contracting to get them. Now, what I wanted to show, this is kind of a summary of that. Some teams are dedicated full-time, some are part-time, some are virtual, some I get from a partnership. So I can either have them by pre-assignment, I can have them by negotiation, some are going to be virtual. All of these things go into how, you need to weigh how you get these people and when they're available and how they're available, like part-time or virtual, versus their skill level, their level of detail, their communication skills, etc. Okay, so some things to consider as you acquire your team. Once you have the team, as a project manager, it's your responsibility to develop the team, right? So the goal is to increase their competencies and improve interaction, which improves communication. There are lots of ways to do that, but no matter what, it's critical because you want to move your team to a high-performing team, right? And so you can co-locate them all in the same place, but we live in a world where virtual is sometimes the way it is. People cost less and travel costs less, right? And the technology is available. So consider how you'll communicate with your teams. Always apply interpersonal skills. Consider in resource management, recognition, training. You're going to do performance assessments and various meeting rules along the way. Okay, always do team building because you are working your team through the 5 stages of Tuckman's theory, which is forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. More on that when we come back for part 2 of the lecture this week.